Kellan Carter didn't see the car coming until it slammed into the guardrail and flipped twice before landing upside down in the ditch ahead of him. "Stay here, Kai," he said to his 8-year-old son, already throwing the truck door open as smoke rose into the dusky sky. Kai nodded, wide-eyed. "Dad, be careful." Kellan sprinted across the gravel, heart pounding. Flames licked the underside of the silver luxury car. He dropped to his knees beside the driver's side, yanked at the door. It was jammed. He slammed his shoulder into it once, twice. On the third try it gave. "Hey. Can you hear me?" he shouted, reaching inside. The woman was unconscious, blonde hair tangled with blood, a tiny trickle running down her cheek. She was wearing a designer coat, now torn at the sleeve, and a diamond bracelet that caught the last light of day. He didn't have time to think about how out of place she looked this deep in rural Georgia. The fire hissed louder. "Come on," he muttered, unbuckling her seatbelt and pulling her free. She was limp but breathing. He carried her to his truck, laying her across the backseat as Kai climbed into the front. Kellan called 911, then glanced at the woman again. She stirred, eyelids fluttering. "You're okay," he said gently. "You were in a wreck. Help's coming." Her lips moved. "Where?" "You're safe," he said. "Don't talk." She didn't listen. Her eyes opened fully and she looked straight at him. "Who are you?" "I'm Kellan, just someone who saw you crash." He paused. "You're lucky I was driving by." Her gaze drifted to the boy in the front seat. "Is that your son?" "Yeah, that's Kai." She blinked again, slower this time, and passed out. At the hospital, Kellan stayed until the nurses took her in for scans. She hadn't told him her name. He gave his information at the front desk and went home, figuring she had family that would show up soon enough. He didn't expect to see her again. But 2 days later, she showed up at his door. Kellan opened it to find her standing there, a little pale but fully conscious and wearing a coat that probably cost more than his monthly rent. He blinked. "You're what?" She gave a soft smile. "Hi, I'm Hayden Calloway. I think I owe you a thank you." Kai peeked around his dad's leg. "That's the lady from the car." Hayden knelt slightly. "Yep, that's me. You were very brave, by the way." Kai beamed. "I didn't even cry." Kellan stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. "You shouldn't be out walking around. You were just in a major wreck." "I took a car service," she said quickly, then looked at him. "I asked the hospital for your name. I just needed to thank you properly. You saved my life." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't do anything special. You pulled me out of a burning car. Anyone would have done it." She tilted her head. "No, they wouldn't have." He hesitated, then opened the door again. "You want to come in?" She smiled. "I'd love to." His house was small, clean, and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something baking. Hayden looked around the living room, taking in the worn couch, the framed photo of Kellan and Kai at a fishing lake, and the stack of bills on the counter. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," she said, turning back to him. I couldn't stop thinking about what you did." "I'm just glad you're okay," Kellan said simply. She looked down at her hands. "I know I probably seem out of place here." "You kinda do," he admitted with a half grin. "But it's not a bad thing," she laughed. "That's honest." "I don't really do the fake stuff," he said. "I noticed." Kai came back into the room holding a tray of cookies. "Want one? Dad made them." Hayden's eyes widened. "You bake," Kellan shrugged. "Kai likes them. And they're cheaper than store-bought." She took one and bit into it. "Okay, this is actually incredible." Kellan raised an eyebrow. "You sound surprised." "I am. No offense," she said with a grin. He laughed. "None taken." She stayed for almost an hour. They talked about the wreck, what little she remembered, and about Kai's school, and how Kellan worked construction during the week and picked up shifts at a mechanic shop on weekends. When she left, Kellan watched her car pull away, a sleek black town car with tinted windows. He thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The next time he saw her was 3 days later when she showed up again, this time holding a paper bag. "I brought coffee," she said, "and muffins." Kellan opened the door slowly. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see you," she said, her voice soft. He blinked. "Me," she stepped closer. "You're the first real person I've met in a long time." Kai came running down the hallway barefoot. "You're back," she knelt. "I am. And I brought blueberry." From that day on, she came by often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with questions about how to fix a leaky sink. Once, she helped Kai with a school project using glitter and poster board, laughing when glue stuck to her fingers. Kellan didn't ask what she did for a living, and she didn't offer, until the night he found out by accident. He was working late at the shop when her name came on the radio. Billionaire tech heiress Hayden Calloway was seen leaving a gala in New York last night. Kellan froze, wrench in hand. The radio kept going, listing her company's Calloway Ventures, Calloway Media, Calloway Tech, and her net worth, which made his chest tighten. He dropped the wrench. Hayden Calloway, billionaire, heiress. He felt like an idiot. She'd been sitting in his house, eating his cookies, laughing at his jokes, and she hadn't said a word. When she showed up the next evening, he opened the door, arms crossed. "You're a billionaire." She looked startled. "You heard?" "Yeah," he said. "I heard." She stepped forward. "Kellan, why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want that to be what you saw when you looked at me." He didn't say anything. "I liked being around you, and Kai, I didn't want to ruin it." He swallowed hard. "It wasn't yours to decide." She looked like she'd been slapped. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, then stepped back and closed the door. But as he leaned against the inside wall, heart pounding, he realized something terrible. He missed her already. Kellan hadn't seen her in over a week. The days blurred together: early mornings on site, late nights at the shop, dinner with Kai, and silence where her laugh used to echo. He hadn't told Kai why she stopped coming around. He didn't need to. Kai had only asked once, and when Kellan didn't answer, he didn't ask again. But her absence hung in the house like a missing photograph, something you don't notice right away, but once you do, it's all you can see. So when he pulled into the driveway late Thursday evening and saw a sleek black car parked across the street, his pulse kicked up. She was sitting on the hood. Not in designer heels this time, but in beat-up sneakers and jeans that looked like they hadn't come from a showroom. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and she held a bag in her lap. Kellan stepped out of his truck slowly. "You planning to wait me out?" Hayden stood up, brushing her hands on her thighs. "I wasn't sure if you'd ask me in." "I'm still not," he said, but there was no heat in it. She walked up the gravel path, stopping a few feet from him. "I didn't come here expecting forgiveness, Kellan. I came because I need to say something." He didn't move. She opened the bag and pulled out an old-looking camera. "This belonged to my mother. She loved taking pictures of everything: sunsets, streetlights, strangers. She always said the best moments were the ones you didn't see coming." Kellan raised an eyebrow. "What does that have to do with me?" She held the camera out to him. "I found this in my storage unit last night. There's a photo inside, from the hospital. Someone must have taken it when you were holding me up outside your truck. You weren't looking at the camera, you were looking at me." "I don't want your things, Hayden. I'm not giving it to you. I'm showing you what I saw." She clicked open the back of the camera and pulled out the photo. It was slightly faded, but clear. Kellan, holding her like she weighed nothing, eyes wide with urgency, mouth pressed into a tight line. He looked terrified and completely focused on her. "I don't remember anything from that moment," she said, "but I look at this, and I know something real happened." "No money, no cameras, just you." Kellan stared at the photo, jaw tight. "You think a picture's gonna fix this?" "No," she said, voice steady, "but I think telling you the truth might." He gave a single nod, stepping aside. "Then come inside." Kai was already at the table, building something with craft sticks and a glue gun. He looked up, froze, then grinned. "You came back." "I did," Hayden said, crouching beside him. "What are you making?" "A catapult." "Dad says it's dangerous, but he's letting me do it anyway if I wear goggles." Kellan walked to the kitchen, pulling out 2 glasses. "Want something?" "Water's fine," Hayden said, still watching Kai. "He's smart and determined." "He's stubborn," Kellan said, handing her the glass. "Gets it honest." When Kai ran off to test his invention in the backyard, Kellan sat across from her. "Start talking." She traced the edge of the glass with her finger. "My father built the company from nothing. He died when I was 22. I stepped in because I had to, not because I wanted to. The board hated me. Investors doubted me. Every move I made was criticized." "You're still running it?" he asked. "Yes, but I've built things too. I've started programs for rural schools, funded medical clinics, backed women-led startups. I've tried to do right by what he built." He leaned back. "That's not what I'm mad about." "I know." He waited. "I lied by omission. I was afraid that if you knew who I was, you'd see me as a headline or a paycheck. I've never asked you for a thing." I know that too, she said, eyes locked on his. That's why I came back. He didn't speak for a long time. Then you had every chance to tell me the truth, and you waited until it blew up. I did, she said, and I regret that. He looked toward the backyard, where Kai's triumphant yell echoed through the screen door. I don't bring people around him if I don't trust them. I didn't ask to be part of his life, she said quietly, but I treasure every moment I've had with him. Kellan rubbed his jaw, the ache behind his ribs growing heavier. I don't know what you want from me. I don't want anything, she said, but I'd like a chance to earn back what I broke. He stood up, walking to the window. This isn't your world, Hayden. This isn't penthouses and galas. It's early mornings, scraped knuckles, overdue bills. I'm not asking you to change, she said, standing too. I'm asking you to let me be part of it. He turned. Why? Because I fell in love with it, with you, with him, with the quiet. With the way you don't pretend. His expression didn't change. She stepped closer. I could stay away. I could go back to New York, and no one would blame you if you never wanted to see me again. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping you'd ask me to stay. Kai burst through the door, holding a broken stick and laughing. The catapult works, kinda. It hit the fence, Hayden laughed, and Kellan didn't stop her when she reached out to high-five him. Later that night, after Kai was asleep, they sat on the porch with the stars overhead and the sound of crickets rising from the fields. Kellan didn't say anything for a long time. Then, I don't know what this is, but I know it doesn't feel fake. It's not. He looked over at her. Then prove it, she met his gaze. Tell me how, stick around, he said. When it's not easy, when it's not convenient, when there's no camera pointed at you. Hayden reached over, took his hand. I already am. The first time Hayden invited Kellan and Kai to her world, it wasn't with a car waiting outside or an assistant calling ahead. It was a handwritten note slipped into Kellan's coat pocket, folded neatly with an address and a time. He found it late at night after fixing a leaky pipe under the sink. Kai had been asleep for hours. The handwriting was delicate, unfamiliar in its elegance. He stared at the address longer than he meant to. He didn't decide to go until the very last minute. The next day, after leaving Kai with his neighbor, Mrs. Latham, who'd watched him on short notice more times than Kellan could count, he drove out of town, following the directions on the note. It took him into the hills, past the edge of where he'd ever bothered to explore, until the trees broke and the road widened. He pulled into a long gravel driveway that curved around a house known estate. It wasn't ostentatious. It wasn't even especially large by mansion standards. But it was the kind of place with ivy crawling up stone walls and glass doors that opened onto open-air terraces. A place built to last, not to show off. Hayden was standing on the steps, wearing boots and a navy flannel shirt rolled up to the elbows. No makeup. Hair tied back. She looked like someone who didn't own a corporate empire. She opened the door before he knocked. You came, she said. I almost didn't. I know. He stepped inside. The interior was warm, filled with soft wood and shelves lined with books. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. It didn't feel like the kind of place he'd pictured when he'd thought the word billionaire. She led him through a sunlit kitchen and out onto a back patio that overlooked a sweeping orchard. Rows of trees stretched out, their leaves shifting in the wind. This was my grandfather's, she said, gesturing to the trees. He started it before the tech company, kept it until he died. My father let it go wild. I've been restoring it slowly. Kellan leaned on the railing. You do this yourself, not all of it, she admitted. But I come out here when I need to think. He watched her for a moment. Why bring me here? Because I wanted you to see something that mattered to me before the world told me who I was supposed to be. He looked back at the orchard. You think this changes things? No, she said. I just think it adds to them. They walked the rows together. She pointed out the trees she'd replanted, the ones she'd lost in storms, the ones she'd stubbornly refused to cut down even when they stopped producing fruit. At one point, she stopped and turned to him. I know you've got questions. Only one, he said. What happens when this stops being an escape? She didn't hesitate. Then I find a way to make it a life. He studied her face, trying to find the version of her that lived in headlines. He couldn't see her. Later, back at the house, she opened a cabinet and pulled out a small wooden box. She opened it and handed him the contents. Stock certificates, he asked, surprised. 10% of my shares. He stepped back, almost dropping them. Why the hell are you handing me this? Because I don't want you to think I've got anything to hide, and because I'm not looking for someone to orbit me, I want someone who'll call me out when I need it. He stared at the paper, then at her. You think giving me part of your company proves something? No, she said. I think choosing to trust you proves something. He handed them back. I don't want this. I know, she said, taking them gently. That's why I was okay offering it. When he left that night, the sky had turned a dark blue, and the trees behind him rustled like they were letting go of something. Back home, Kai was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Kellan carried him to bed, then sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from him. He thought about what she'd said, that she wanted a life, not an escape. The next morning, he found her outside his shop. No driver, no entourage, just her, fiddling with the zipper of her jacket. I want to learn, she said the second he opened the door. Learn what? How to fix things with my hands, in case I ever need a backup plan. He raised an eyebrow. You think you can handle oil and grease? I've worn couture gowns heavier than engine blocks. I'll manage. The first hour was a disaster. She dropped a wrench on her toe and let out a string of impressive curses. She mixed up a socket with a spark plug and wiped her hands on her jeans, leaving long black streaks, but she didn't complain. Not once. By the third hour, she'd taken apart a carburetor without snapping anything. He didn't say it aloud, but he was impressed. She said, crouched beside the truck they'd been working on, I used to think power meant control. Now I think it might mean freedom. He handed her a rag. Freedom to do what? To choose who I am and who I love. She looked up at him, her hands smeared with grease, eyes clear. He didn't kiss her then. He wanted to, but something stopped him, not fear, not hesitation. It was the sense that when it happened, it had to mean something more than just want. That night, after Kai had gone to bed, Kellan stepped out onto the porch. The stars were out again, same as the night she'd come back, only this time he wasn't wondering whether she belonged. He was wondering how long he could keep pretending he hadn't already made his choice. Hayden stood frozen in the middle of Kellan's living room, blinking at the piano like it had appeared out of nowhere. I don't understand, she said slowly. Where did this come from? Kellan crossed his arms, leaning against the doorway. I built it. You built a piano, he shrugged. Not from scratch. I found an old frame behind the church a few towns over. It was water-damaged and full of rust. I've been working on it at the shop after hours. Her eyes drifted across the polished wood and newly strung keys. The finish was smooth, dark walnut, and the legs curved like something out of a music hall. It's beautiful, she whispered. You mentioned your mother used to play, Kellan said. Figured you might want something that reminded you of her. Her fingers hovered above the keys. I haven't touched one since she died. He said nothing, letting the silence stretch between them. Then Hayden sat down, pressed one key, then another. The sound was soft, clear. Did you tune it yourself? Spent 2 weekends on it. She played a few chords, her hands hesitant at first, then steady. Kai appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Is that music? Hayden looked over her shoulder. I woke you, he shook his head, padding across the room and curling up on the couch. You can keep playing, it's nice. She smiled and turned back to the keys. Kellan watched her play until the song faded and her hands fell still. I don't know what to say, she said quietly. You don't have to say anything. She stood and walked over to him, her gaze steady. You've done more for me than anyone ever has, and not because you wanted something, just because you cared. He didn't look away. You matter. That was enough. Later that week, Hayden called him and asked if he could come to an event. Her voice had been careful, almost uncertain. It's not a gala, she said. It's a fundraiser for a school in a town not far from here. I've been working with them for over a year. I'd like you to see it. Kellan hesitated. What do I wear? She laughed softly. Whatever makes you comfortable. He did. And when he arrived, dressed in a navy button-down and clean jeans, he spotted Hayden standing near the stage, talking to a group of teachers. She looked different here, focused, grounded, like she belonged. When she saw him, she lit up in a way that made the entire room fade. He wasn't used to crowds like this. He wasn't used to being introduced as someone more than just a mechanic or a single dad, but Hayden didn't hesitate. This is Kellan Carter, she said to the school director. He's the reason I'm still breathing, and the reason I remember what real kindness looks like." The director shook his hand. "We've heard about you. It's good to finally meet the man behind the story." Kellan blinked. "Story?" Hayden gave a sheepish smile. "There was a feature in the paper about the crash. I didn't name you, but I talked about what happened, about how it changed things." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. After the speeches, Hayden pulled him aside. "I've been offered a board seat in London," she said, watching his face carefully. "It's a year-long position, high profile, but I haven't said yes." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because I don't want to leave something behind that might be real." His chest tightened. "You think this is something?" "I know it is." He took a breath. "If you need to go, I won't stop you." "I don't want you to stop me," she said. "I want you to tell me if there's something here worth staying for." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "What's that?" He handed it to her. "Kai's drawing. He made it last night." She opened it. It was crude, drawn in crayon, a stick figure version of Kellan, Kai, and Hayden, all standing in front of a house. The son had a smiling face. She swallowed. "He put me in. He asked if you were part of our family now." Her voice wavered. "What did you say?" "I told him that was up to you." Hayden looked up. "Kellan, I don't want a life that's split between two worlds. I want one that makes sense. With you." "With him?" He stepped closer, lifting his hand to her face. "Then stay, build it with us." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I've already started." He kissed her, then slowly, deliberately, without hesitation. It wasn't a kiss of uncertainty or apology. It was a promise. They returned to his house that night, where Kai had built a pillow fort that took up half the living room. Hayden crawled in beside him, laughing as he handed her a flashlight and a book. "Only if you do the voices," he said. She glanced at Kellan. "All of them?" He leaned in, resting his arm behind her. "Especially the dragon." When the lights were off and the house quiet, Hayden turned to Kellan. "I've had wealth, power, control, but none of it ever felt like home." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And now," her voice was barely a whisper, "now it does." Months later, the orchard behind her grandfather's house bloomed in full for the first time in over a decade. They stood beneath the trees on a warm spring day. Friends and family gathered as Hayden walked toward Kellan in a soft ivory dress, barefoot in the grass. Kai stood between them, holding a ring box. Kellan didn't need a chapel or chandeliers. He only needed the look in her eyes. When he said, "I do," it wasn't just to Hayden. It was to a life he never saw coming, a life built on trust, grit, and the kind of love that didn't care about where you started, only where you ended up. And he knew, as she took his hand, that they had ended up exactly where they were meant to be. The day the county announced budget cuts to the local education system, Hayden was already waiting outside Kellan's shop before sunrise. She had a clipboard, her laptop bag, and the kind of fire in her eyes that Kellan had come to recognize as a sign she wasn't just upset, she was about to change something. "They're closing the after-school programs," she said the moment he unlocked the door. Kellan rubbed sleep from his eyes. "All of them, every single one. Arts, music, tutoring, even the weekend library sessions, and they're cutting teacher hours." Kellan walked inside, flipping on the lights. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to help me build something that lasts." She laid out her plan on the workbench, a local community center, privately funded but publicly accessible, with reading rooms, music classes, and a fully equipped workshop for kids to learn trade skills. She already had 3 properties in mind and had spoken to 2 retired teachers willing to volunteer. "I know we can't fix everything," she said, glancing at him, "but we can protect what matters." Kellan studied the map she'd drawn and pointed to a vacant lot near the edge of town. "This one. It's got space, and I know the guy who owns it. He'd sell to someone who's actually gonna use it." Hayden nodded. "Then we start today." They spent the next month pouring every spare hour into the project. Kellan oversaw the renovations. Hayden handled permits, contractors, and funding. She never once brought in her corporate team. Everything was done locally by people who cared. Kai came after school, helping paint murals with the other kids. One afternoon, he ran up to Hayden, holding a paintbrush smeared with orange. "Can we do a science room too?" With circuits and stuff, Hayden knelt to his level. "You want to learn how to build things," he nodded. "Like Dad, but with wires. Then we'll make it happen." By the time the center opened, word had spread far beyond the county. Local news covered the ribbon cutting. A state representative showed up uninvited and asked Hayden if she wanted to expand the model elsewhere. She smiled politely and said, "Let me see how this one does first." That night, after the last guest left and the lights dimmed, Hayden and Kellan stood in the main hall, surrounded by the quiet echo of everything they'd built. "This used to feel impossible," she said, running her fingers along the edge of a newly installed bookshelf. Kellan stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You made it possible." She leaned back against him. "We did." He kissed the side of her neck. "You know, most people would have just written a check." "I've spent my life writing checks," she said softly. "This is the first time I felt the difference." He turned her around, brushing her hair from her face. "You're not the woman I met on the side of the road anymore," she smiled. "And you're not just the man who pulled me out of a car. What am I now? The man I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life." Kellan didn't hesitate this time. He pulled a small velvet box from his back pocket and opened it. Hayden's breath caught. "I was gonna wait," he said, voice low, "but I think you've waited long enough." The ring was simple platinum with a single emerald-cut diamond, elegant, solid like her. "You're sure?" she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." She said yes before he finished the question. They didn't want a grand wedding. Not this time. Just their closest friends, a few neighbors, and Kai, who walked Hayden down the makeshift aisle set between rows of apple trees behind the community center. Hayden wore a soft gray dress that caught the wind. Kellan wore a navy shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie. They exchanged vows written by hand, promises that came not from fantasy, but from everything they'd already survived. Afterward, they danced barefoot in the grass while Kai played DJ with an old speaker and a playlist he'd made himself. When the sun dipped below the hills, Kellan stepped away and led her toward the edge of the orchard. "I have one more surprise," he said, guiding her through the trees. They emerged into a small clearing. A stone bench sat beneath a canopy of lights strung between the branches. In the center stood a tall wooden sign with metal lettering. She read it out loud. "The Callaway Carter Center for Growth and Grace." He looked at her. "It's yours and his and mine." She turned to him, eyes shining. "I love you." "I know," he said, pulling her close. "But I never get tired of hearing it." They sat together in the clearing, the stars blinking into view above them. No cameras, no noise, just the quiet hum of a life finally aligned. Months passed. The center thrived. Kai started a robotics club. Hayden launched a scholarship fund in her mother's name. Kellan taught weekend classes on woodworking and mechanics. They built a garden, a greenhouse, a stage for theater productions. Their days were busy, full of laughter, messes, learning, and love. And their nights were quiet, filled with soft conversations, shared silences, and the comfort of a home built not from wealth or rescue, but from choice. From staying. From growing. One evening, Kellan stood on the porch, watching Hayden chase Kai across the yard, both of them laughing as the sprinklers came on and soaked them. He leaned against the post, arms crossed, smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Mrs. Latham walked up the path, carrying a basket of strawberries from her garden. "You look like a man who found what he was looking for," she said. Kellan didn't take his eyes off them. "I didn't know I was looking." "Even better," she said, handing him the basket. "Means it found you first," he nodded slowly. "Yeah, it did." Behind him, the house glowed with warm light. Ahead, the woman he loved danced barefoot in the wet grass with the boy they were raising together. And for the first time in his life, everything made perfect, undeniable sense.